The chamber of the Galactic Council floated in high orbit above the gas giant Genera, a sprawling latticework of polished metal and ancient stones suspended by gravitic architecture that predated most of its occupants. From every corner of the galaxy, representatives had gathered dozens of species, each with their own traditions, priorities, and quiet prejudices. It was here that law was written not in justice, but in balance. Dominance disguised as diplomacy. And today, they had gathered to address Earth. On a circular platform at the center of the council floor, a projection hovered, Earth's planetary profile, its moons, satellite network, trade routes, colonies. Dotted along the outer rim were red indicators, military installations, unauthorized defense platforms, energy grids pulsing with expansion. To many in the room, Earth's growth was alarming. But to others, it was insulting. They've crossed. The line rasped one delegate, a scaled creature with eyes like submerged coals. Their colony on Arcos V activated planetary defenses last cycle. Against inspection drones, it is no longer a misunderstanding. They've launched unregistered mining expeditions into sectors protected under interstellar code added. Another, tapping a data tablet with visible agitation. One of our survey crews was intercepted, warned off. They're acting like a sovereign power. Someone spat, like they think they're equals. A pause. Then, from the central dais, the speaker of the council, a tall, mantled-like figure named Saro, lifted both of its arms to silence the bickering. Its voice came slow, modulated to be heard across the wide auditory spectrum of the chamber. Enough. The humans have been warned, observed, advised. They continue to ignore protocol. And so, it concluded, we will act. A murmur spread. Across the seats, sanctions? One delegate asked. No, Saro replied. They will not respect pressure. They will respond to force. We send them one message, unified by this council. Behind the speaker, it's a holographic message compiled on the screen of transmission, layered in every known galactic language and data frequency. Designed to reach Earth's highest military and political authorities, it was direct, cold, legal, in tone, but unmistakable in intent. Cease all expansion. Disband your outer colony militias. Submit to oversight. Failure to comply will be regarded as a hostile act against the peace of the galaxy. They expected fear. Compliance. A panicked scramble for compromise. Most newly spacefaring worlds, when confronted by the Council's authority, chose to fold. Quietly, and integrate under supervision. It was what had always happened, but Earth had never been like the others. When the message was received on Solnet, Earth's planetary defense network paused for exactly 9 seconds. Then a reply was sent. Not by a committee, not by a diplomat. By Earth's unified strategic command. The message contained no flourish, no hedging, no uncertainty. It was just 3 words, embedded in every major interstellar protocol format. We choose war. Back in the council chamber, silence fell heavier than atmosphere. Dozens of delegates leaned in as the words flashed across their displays. Some blinked in confusion. Others chuckled in disbelief, assuming it must be an error in translation. But it wasn't. A secondary data stream confirmed Earth had moved its industrial output to military sectors within minutes of sending the reply. Defense stations activated. Global shields on outlying colonies. Civilian ships began receiving armament upgrades. Supply chains shifted from agriculture to munitions. Even the digital voice of Earth's AI administrator, long considered a symbol of calm diplomacy, issued a chilling statement. Threats are acknowledged. Countermeasures underway. Back on Genera, the council sat frozen as Saro finally spoke. They, didn't even hesitate. And in that stillness, the unease began to creep in, not because Earth had rejected the threat, but because Earth had answered like it had been waiting for it. The ripples of Earth's response reached far beyond the great chamber of the Galactic Council, from trade hubs on the rim worlds to deep space embassies nestled within orbital rings. From research stations orbiting neutron stars to nomadic fleets wandering ancient warp routes, everyone heard what Earth had said. not just the words. The tone, the terrifying, efficient confidence of it. There had been no delay, no negotiation, no plea for understanding. Earth's three-word response, "We choose war," was not the blustering of a cornered animal. It was a declaration, cool and precise, issued with the decisiveness of a species that had decided long ago what to do when someone pushed them too far in the diplomatic enclave of the Navaran League, a species known for its prudence and centuries of neutrality. Ambassadors met in panicked whispers. "This must be political theater," hissed one. "Surely they don't mean war with the Council? Have you met them?" Another answered. "They never bluff, they challenge." Across the galaxy, surveillance analysts began pulling archived footage, from military exercises to civilian protests, to reassess what humanity was truly capable of. Until now, Earth's place in the interstellar community had been ambiguous. Their technology was advancing faster than most had expected. Their colonies were expanding in harsh, resource-starved systems. Their people didn't quit, but this was different. This was the line crossed. Back on Genera, the Galactic Council reconvened for an emergency session. The speaker stood once more, slower this time, more cautious. Behind them, a 3D tactical display now showed Earth's strategic infrastructure. Orbital railguns, fusion core shipyards, stealth drone carriers, and a dense web of encrypted military satellites. The data feeds updated in real time, flashing red across multiple sectors. Earth's industrial capacity, once considered disorganized and inefficient, was adapting at breakneck speed. "What are we seeing?" asked one delegate, a wire-referred elder of the Delctor Assembly, the Council's war analyst. A crystalline being named Vale flicked a claw toward the main screen. "They've activated every known defense protocol across their colonies. Outer ring stations are broadcasting hardened code signatures. Civilian freighters are being pulled into dock and outfitted with turret banks. There, it's converting their entire infrastructure." "In ours?" Other gasped. "They were ready," Vale said grimly. "They've been preparing, quietly, for years." The room fell into a nervous murmur. It wasn't just the speed, it was the intent. The preparations Earth had set in motion were not reactionary. They weren't building toward defense. They were preparing for projection. Real war was. Something the Galactic Council hadn't truly fought in over a century. Policed? Yes. Suppressed rebellions? Certainly. But those had been one-sided. Fleets of overwhelming size, intimidating, fractured systems with no unity, no long-term planning, no real resistance. Humanity, however, was unified. And worse, they had studied history, a lot of it. Wars on Earth weren't a forgotten ritual. They were a crucible the species had never truly left behind. Every human colony, no matter how isolated or peaceful, carried embedded protocols for rapid militarization. Every major city had access to subterranean command hubs. Earth's orbital grid, previously thought to be a fragmented mess of private satellites, was actually a layered, decentralized defense web with failover routines. And then there were their ship's top council. Intelligence had estimated Earth's interstellar fleet at around 36 combat-capable vessels. That number was wrong. Within the first day, nearly 80 human warships had activated transponder beacons from hidden ports, deep-sea vaults, and decommissioned mining fleets, even civilian. Exploration craft began broadcasting military call signs. Not all of them were modern. Some were old, even outdated by galactic standards. But humans had this habit of repurposing what others discarded. They didn't just build weapons. They turned everything into one. Back in the council chamber, a vote was called: escalation or containment. The traditionalists wanted to overwhelm Earth, immediately crush the rebellion with overwhelming force. Show strength, end it fast. But others hesitated, not out of mercy, out of fear. What if we underestimate them? Not, one delegate murmured. A Raleigh diplomat, a species known for cautious war strategy, spoke next. They did not plead. They did not waver. That response came from a civilization that has already made peace with the cost of war. The chamber went silent. For the first time in its long history, the Galactic Council found itself not issuing orders, but debating survival. Meanwhile, on Earth, broadcast towers illuminated with coordinated messages. Civil defense networks were calmly updated. Automated systems rerouted energy grids to support high-output manufacturing. AI command modules began calculating logistical chains with the cold precision of something that did not care for diplomacy, only for victory. There were no riots, no chaos, only purpose. In a press conference aired globally, Earth's spokesperson, a quiet woman in a plain uniform, stepped before the cameras. Her voice was measured. Not defiant, not angry, just certain. "We've been patient," she said. "We've bent to pressure. We've played by your rules. But if you choose to threaten our people, no, this we won't run." She paused. "We'll bring the war to you." Across the stars, for the first time in generations, the galaxy remembered what it meant to earn peace, at the cost of awakening something that never needed to conquer to be feared. A united, angry humanity. The Council chose Arcos-3, located at the edge of the Hydran Arm. Arcos-3 was one of Earth's newer frontier colonies, mineral-rich, lightly populated, and, by the Council's estimation, undefended. To most observers, it was the perfect target. For a swift and punishing demonstration, strike hard, strike early, and let the humans taste vulnerability. The plan was simple. Dispatch a task force of 3 heavy cruisers to escort corvettes and a diplomatic carrier. Surround the planet, broadcast a final ultimatum. And if the humans resisted, blast the colony from orbit. The operation had been rehearsed dozens of times. What the Council didn't realize was that Earth had rehearsed it too, as the task force exited hyperspace on the fringe of the Arcos system. They immediately noticed an anomaly. There was no response. No defense signal. No distress beacon. No planetary traffic. Just silence. "Odd," the fleet commander murmured from the bridge of the lead cruiser. "Are they evacuating?" "Negative," came the reply from the sensor officer. "No signs of mass transit or departure routes. No thermal anomalies in orbit. It's as if the planet is asleep." Suspicion crept in, thin as a blade. The ships drifted closer. The planetary surface showed signs of habitation. Mining domes, power stations, agricultural zones. But every beacon was dark. Every transmission node inactive. Then the static broke. A voice comm, male, and filtered through an old Earth dialect, came over all open channels simultaneously. "You shouldn't have come." No more words followed. The Council commander scoffed. Scare tactics. Power down their orbital grid and prepare a landing. He never finished the sentence. At that precise moment, the cruiser's ventral sensors lit up with a flurry of alerts. Not from above, but from beneath, deep inside the crust of Arcos-3. A blinding blue-white beam surged up from the planet's northern hemisphere, slicing through space with staggering precision. One of the escort corvettes didn't even have time to raise shields before the beam struck mid-hull, vaporizing it in a flash of energy. Then came the missiles, not fired from silos, not launched from ships, but ejected from hardened launch tubes camouflaged within the colony's mining infrastructure. Their heat signatures were masked, their trajectories non-linear. They split mid-flight into dozens of smaller kinetic warheads, each one tearing into a Council vessel's flank like shrapnel guided by hate. The cruiser nearest the strike zone crumbled in seconds. Its hull breached along the spine atmosphere. Boiling away, the Council task force never had time to call for backup. Within 12 minutes, now 4 of the 6 ships were either destroyed or drifting. The diplomatic carrier, designed for communication and civilian transport, fled the engagement zone, only to find its FTL path blocked by a strange, flickering distortion. Fieldan experimental jamming protocol Earth had never publicly revealed. In the control bunker beneath the surface of Arcos-3, Commander Blake wiped blood from his brow and stared at the tactical display. The colony had been evacuated 2 days earlier. Every man, woman, and child relocated via stealth transports to orbital shelters in their place. automated railgun arrays, remote-guided launch platforms, and a network of decoys designed to mimic civilian energy use. A ghost town built for war. Status? Asked calmly. 3 hostiles disabled. 1 confirmed destroyed. Carriers running, said the AI core embedded in the command terminal. Remaining cruiser, attempting a retreat. Blake nodded. Let it go. Let them tell the story. The AI paused. Orders. He glanced once more at the hollowed-out chamber where once a mining operations room had stood, now rebuilt into an improvised war command. Reinforce the decoy. Signals, and prep the next colony. This won't be the last time they come. Above, the surviving Council cruiser limped through space, engine trails flaring erratically. Its communication channels buzzed with broken panic. They were waiting. For us, the commander barked. This was never a colony, it was a trap. But the most disturbing data had yet to be analyzed. Moments before the Council fleet entered Arco's orbit, a long-range signal had pulsed from Earth, not as a distress call, but as a beacon. And from the dark edges of human-controlled space, new transponders had begun activating. Old ships. Retired ships? Civilian haulers. All of them re-registering under a single fleet code. Reclamation protocol active. Earth wasn't just defending. Earth was taking back the void. Across dozens of Council-line sectors, similar beacons began pulsing from human colonies, each one activating hidden caches, cloaked satellites, dormant weapons. The galaxy had assumed humanity was bold. They hadn't realized it was also prepared by the end of the cycle. The Council's official military report would summarize the Arcos incident with a single-line: clinical, terse, and utterly inadequate. First strike repelled. Enemy response: coordinated, premeditated, and escalatory. But in the private channels, within the encrypted whispers of those who had watched from orbit, the message was simpler. Earth isn't just fighting. Earth is hunting. Asterisk: the Council had grown accustomed to control. For centuries, its dominance wasn't maintained by firepower alone, but by predictability. Power came from visibility: massive fleets stationed at border systems, emissaries at every starport, diplomacy always backed by orbital platforms. Their fleets flew polished banners and held formation with near-theatrical precision. Their doctrine was simple: overwhelming presence crushed rebellion before it sparked. So when ships began vanishing from their own patrol routes without distress calls, without debris, without even sensor echoes, confusion began to spread. First, it was a long-range transport near the starless edge of Sectavale. Then an encrypted courier relay failed to arrive. Then 3 ships from an auxiliary fuel convoy blinked off the nav grid mid-jump. No pirates claimed responsibility. No trace could be found. They were simply gone. The Council's admirals dismissed it at first: technical failures. But those explanations collapsed when a surveillance outpost in the Thanos Reach transmitted a single, chilling burst before its feed went dark. They're already here. The Council's high command convened in haste. Security analysts rushed in with red-marked data packets, their faces pale beneath scaled or chitinous skin. Each report was more damning than the last. The pattern was no longer random. The missing ships formed arcs, curves, webbed lines across the star map. Not chaos: strategy, Fleet Marshal Tren, a veteran of 8 pacification campaigns, leaned in over the glowing tactical display. Who's doing this? The reply came from the intelligence director, her voice tight with unease. We've confirmed multiple overlapping signal fragments, Earthian command protocols, deep-coded. Impossible, Tren snapped. Yeah, they don't have stealth drives advanced enough to bypass our border net. The largest ships run hot as suns. That's what we thought, she said grimly. Played the footage. Grainy and disjointed, recorded by a civilian mining drone orbiting a dead moon. It showed a Council freighter, massive, slow, unescorted. For a few seconds, it drifted peacefully along its route, then, like a shadow peeling away from the void, something detached from the black dot. It had no lights, no ID beacon. Its hull was patchworked with stealth plates and meteor-scarred metal. made no sound, emitted no radiation. Trail. But as the angle shifted, it revealed a silhouette unmistakable to anyone who studied Earth's naval archives. A ship class decommissioned nearly a century ago. The Valkyrie-class strike frigate. Only now, it wasn't retired, it was hunting. They were scrapping these, someone whispered. No, said the intelligence director. They were hiding them. Within hours, similar sightings began to surface, always blurry. Often fragmented, sometimes only caught as flickers in the corner of sensor sweeps. What became clear was this. Earth wasn't building a fleet from scratch. It had been collecting one for decades. Old ships. Ghost ships. Vessels that had disappeared in transport accidents or failed inspections, all quietly retrofitted, stripped of transponders, and cloaked in absolute silence. A network of invisible predators. Moving across the stars, the Ghost Fleet, Council, assets began falling at a staggering rate. Supply depots and supposedly safe sectors were raided. Listening posts left gutted. One planetary governor woke to find his orbital platform's command deck depressurized. Every guard inside dead. Every weapon system disabled, with a simple message scrawled across the screen in English. You shouldn't have started this. Worse still, the fleet's behavior shattered Council expectations. These weren't ships engaging in planetary sieges or brute force assaults. They hit logistics, communications, infrastructure. They moved like insurgents, but thought like tacticians. They didn't claim territory, they burned away the roots that sustained it. They weren't at war with the Council's fleets. They were at war with its foundation. Fleet Marshal Trend pounded the console. How can they move like this? Where are they coordinating from? Again, the director answered. We don't know. All command signals are encoded and distributed across their entire network. There's no central relay, no flagship. What do they want? The lights dimmed. The Council's ambassador to Earth, who had narrowly escaped from a diplomatic complex days earlier, leaned forward with a flat expression. They don't want anything, he said. They're not fighting for demands. Then, why the war? Because we threatened them, he said. And they warned us. We didn't listen. Out across the stars, Council outposts doubled security, convoys rerouted. Civilian traffic all but ceased in the outer sectors. But the damage had already begun. Trust in the Council fractured. Member systems long loyal began hesitating. Some closed their ports, others refused patrol assistance. Trade slowed because, everywhere visible or not, the shadow of Earth's ghost. Fleet lingered. It didn't matter whether a system had been attacked. It only mattered that it could be. And as the days wore on and silence deepened between known jump points, a new understanding crystallized among the galaxy's old powers. The humans weren't chasing glory. They were erasing threats. One ship at a time. Asterisk. The Galactic Council had finally accepted what its pride had tried to ignore. Was not reacting. It was executing. Every strike, every ship, every ghostly disappearance wasn't part of a rebellion spiraling into chaos. It was a doctrine, sharpened in secret, and unleashed with surgical precision. The Council had protocols for war. 100 species had agreed. On them across centuries, disputes followed, escalations. Escalations triggered resolutions. Even in conflict, there was order rules, warnings. Limits.Earth didn't recognize those limits, and worse, it didn't care. In a war chamber buried beneath the central tower of the Galactic Council's core station, the highest-ranking tacticians, a 15-member species gathered around a glowing star chart flickering with red zones. Every marked point told the same story: supply lines severed, data links corrupted, orbital assets destroyed, colonies isolated without a shot fired. What disturbed them most wasn't the scale of Earth's assaulted, was its restraint. Fleet. Marshal Trend stood at the edge of the room, fists tight behind his back. They're not hitting population centers. No terror strikes. No planetary bombardments. No indiscriminate violence. Then what are they doing? Someone asked. They're removing support systems. One by one. Quietly like. Surgeons, Trend said. They're not making noise. They're making a point. The Council was used to crushing resistance by spectacle. Atmospheric burns, orbital sieges, mass detentions. Fear had always been their best tool. But Earth had brought something more terrifying: purpose. While the Council still argued over whether to officially declare the war a crisis action or a non-compliant sovereignty engagement, Earth had already moved on to Phase 3. In the Nalthus corridor, 8 human ships appeared without warning, bypassing every early warning satellite, and boarded a Council databank hub. Not destroyed, boarded. The crew was disabled, the databanks downloaded, and the hub left in orbit with a note spray-painted in human alphabet: "We're not fighting you. We're erasing your illusions." In another system, a Council deep space relay station began receiving its own internal logs, rewritten in real time by Earthian malware so advanced that it mimicked the voices of the station's staff. Entire weeks of surveillance were replaced with looped, falsified calm. When they finally realized the deception, the fuel reserves were already drained, the drone wing disabled, and the mainframe stolen. The Galactic Council could no longer ignore it. The humans weren't just attacking, they were winning. Without ever giving the Council a proper battle, protocols began to unravel in desperation. The Council authorized Directive 17A, something not used in over a century: preemptive planetary aggression. They would strike Earth directly, strike hard, and end it with a shock campaign. 30 warships, 2 dreadnoughts, 3 orbital assault carriers. The plan was to bypass the asteroid belt, jump to a low lunar orbit, and launch simultaneous precision strikes on Earth's military nerve centers. But when they arrived, they didn't find a planet scrambling for survival. They found a planet that had already mapped their approach. Earth's orbital grid, long believed to be a tangled web of civilian junk and outdated cum towers, came to life. Hidden railgun platforms rotated silently from behind lunar shadows. Laser-targeted kinetic interceptors, launched from what had once been communications satellites, tore through the Council's assault ships in volleys too fast to counter. Artificial intelligence-driven targeting algorithms adapted in seconds. The dreadnoughts didn't even get close enough to fire by the end of the first hour. 23 of the 30 ships had been destroyed or disabled, and the humans hadn't fired a single nuclear weapon. On the ground, Earth was calm. No global alerts, no civil collapse. The cities remained lit, the oceans undisturbed, because humanity had already prepared for this. Every skyscraper with blast shielding, every power grid linked to emergency bunkers. Every colony on Earth and beyond had already rotated to wartime. Protocols before the first ship crossed Neptune's orbit. The Council had expected rage, chaos, pleas for mercy. Instead, they were met with readiness. Inside the surviving Council, command ship, Admiral Thalazan, the officer who had once subdued 3 insurrections without loss, sat in the aftermath, his claws trembling above the tactical screen. They knew he'd come. His comms officer was silent. Then softly, "Sir, we're the ones following their plan now." Back on Earth, in an underground war room deep beneath the Andes Mountains, a woman in a dark uniform stared at the incoming data. Her officers moved quickly but quietly, relaying updates from 17 systems across human-controlled space. "They've broken their own protocols," her aide reported. "Orbital aggression confirmed." She didn't look surprised. "They thought we were amateurs," she said. "They thought rules would protect them." She leaned forward, tapped a screen displaying a map of the Council's inner supply lines, and marked 10 targets in red. Time to show them how humans break wars. Within hours, those 10 locations went dark, not bombed, not occupied, just ... offline, as if Earth had reached across the stars and simply unplugged them. And as silence spread from one edge of the galaxy to the next, the Galactic Council began to understand something ancient and terrible. The humans weren't violating protocol. They had outgrown it. Asterisk, by the time Earth's orbital defenses repelled the full force of the Council's Directive 17A fleet, war had officially entered a new phase, not by declaration nor by treaty, but by something older, more primal: the shifting of fear. The Galactic Council had always believed itself to be the immovable object in the galaxy. Power was its inheritance, control its tradition. For generations, its fleets had acted as peacekeepers and enforcers, ensuring that no single species disrupted the fragile balance of influence that kept old. Power's comfortable, but now that balance was gone, and Earth had not just tipped the scales, it had shattered them. Across the void, reports began streaming in, entire sectors refusing to comply with Council fleet movements. Planetary governors requesting withdrawal from mutual defense. Pacts. Merchant convoys quietly rerouting to human-controlled trade zones where the risk of being vaporized was now statistically lower than passing through Council-monitored space. But the true moment, the breaking point, did not come from diplomacy or rebellion. It came at Narsa's reach. The Narsa system was a linchpin, a triple-junction trade corridor, home to 3 major Council fleet yards, and guarded by one of the oldest orbital defense stations still in use. No one had ever contested it. Its location alone, flanked by nebulous storms and unstable gravity tides, made it a natural fortress. The Council had stationed a vanguard fleet there. It was commanded by Admiral Kirizawa, tactician known for layered defenses and ruthless containment strategies. Kiros had seen the reports. He knew of Earth's sudden rise, but Narsa, he believed, was untouchable. What he didn't know was that Earth had never intended to touch it directly. The operation began with what seemed like a communications glitch. The station's long-range comms scrambled for 6 minutes, just enough to delay an incoming transmission from one of the outer satellites. By the time the error was corrected, the satellite's last image showed a long, thin object tearing through the gas cloud surrounding the planet's outer rim, its energy signature mast. Its trajectory impossible. A moment later, it emerged. An entire space station launched through FTL, dropped out of hyperspace, not into orbit, but into the upper atmosphere of Narsa's primary gas giant. Using its gravity well to sling forward at terminal velocity, no one had ever tried it before. No. One had survived trying. But Earth had built this particular station for one purpose. It had no crew, no habitat modules, no reactors, only mass. Steel, tungsten, uranium, and a reinforced central core lined with magnetogravitic stabilizers to keep it intact just long enough to do what it was designed for: destroy everything it touched at precisely for 13 system time. The station hurled out of the gas giant's pull like a divine hammer, untraceable and unignorable, and slammed into the outer wall of the Narsa shipyards. 3 dreadnoughts were instantly reduced to debris. The ripple effect tore through docked cruisers, unlaunched fighter wings, and sent electromagnetic pulses into the station's shield grid. Forcing a critical failure, half of Narsa's defense went offline in seconds, and before the fires had even stopped spreading, the Ghost Fleet arrived. 11 ships. No comms. No formations. They emerged from the surrounding nebula storms in complete silence, their hulls coated in gravitic sheaths that rendered them invisible to standard sensor arrays. They didn't engage in battle. They performed surgery. Precision strike on the central command relay cut off the fleet's coordination. Another on the logistics platform ignited a chain reaction that wiped out supply. Reserves meant to last 3 cycles. Then, with cold efficiency, they vanished. Asterisk. The Council fleet didn't chase them. They couldn't, because they no longer knew where they were. On the 3rd moon of Narsa's reach, a backup command post tried to send a distress beacon, but instead received a live feed. It showed Earth's representative and a generated hologram of a neutral face, expression calm. "We asked for peace," it said. "You sent war. Now we send the future. Adapt or vanish." That transmission wasn't just received by the Council. It was leaked by Morning Cycle. It had been broadcast across over 2,000 colonies, translated into 180 languages. Civilian and military alike watched as the myth of the Council's invincibility burned away. Like atmosphere against re-entry, what followed was not chaos. It was realignment. Entire Council-aligned planets began opening diplomatic channels with Earth. Independent fleets, once hired as Council auxiliaries, refused to engage human vessels. On some worlds, citizens rioted not against Earth, but against their own leadership, demanding answers as to why this war had begun in the first place. The idea of human fear had evaporated in its place. Something more potent spread. Respect. Born of dread, and as the Council scrambled to contain political fractures, Admiral Kiros disgraced, wounded, and watching the ruins of his fleet from a survival pod finally understood what Earth had done. They hadn't just attacked infrastructure, they had attacked certainty. The certainty that power was inherited. The certainty that systems couldn't be broken. The certainty that the galaxy's rules could never be rewritten. But Earth didn't ask to rewrite the rules. They just showed up with a pen and wrote in blood, asterisk. The transmission came not with fanfare, not with bravado, but with a clarity that was more unsettling than any threat the Council had ever received. A single shuttle's Mar, unarmed, with no escort, entered the diplomatic corridor of the Council's high chamber station above the gas giant Tikal. It carried no ambassadors, no armed guards, no show of force. Just a human dressed in civilian clothing, stepping onto the most secure floor in the galaxy without flinching. Security didn't stop them, not because they weren't allowed, but because no one moved. Not the guards, not the diplomats, not even the Chancellor. There was a silence, a post-fear stillness that settled over the chamber, like a gravitational field. Everyone knew this was no longer a negotiation. It was an update, a final page in a chapter Earth had written without needing their approval. The human approached the central dais. No podium, no datapad, just her voice. "We did not start this war," she said. "We didn't seek territory. We didn't send fleets. We sent warnings." She paused, letting the quiet speak as much as her words. "And when you ignored them, when you threatened us, we responded the only way we've ever known how, with action, with unity, with finality." Behind her, the stars outside the chamber stretched endlessly into the void, now a place where the Council's ships moved with caution. Earth's presence was more a rumor than a fact. A rumor backed by wreckage, silence, and missing fleets. "You wanted Earth on its knees," she continued. "But we don't kneel. We remember. We endure. And when forced, we fight not, because we love war, but because we've spent our entire history surviving it." The Council had no answer. Because what response do you offer to a civilization that had waged a war it did not want, and won it without compromise? One delegate finally stood, an elder from a species that had not fought a war in 2,000 cycles. "What is it you want?" they asked, voice trembling. "Dominion, tribute, submission?" The human looked at them, eyes steady. "No," she said, "we want the galaxy to understand that we are not to be threatened again, that we're not children to be governed, nor savages to be tamed. You don't have to fear us," she leaned in. "You just have to respect us." And with that, she turned and walked away. No demands, no ultimatums, just truth. The aftermath was not what the galaxy expected. Earth didn't claim territory. It didn't establish a new council or attempt to dominate commerce. It didn't write a new interstellar charter. It didn't need to, because Earth had already changed everything, not by ruling, but by revealing. It revealed that old powers were not permanent. That control was a myth maintained by fear and assumption that humanity, species once dismissed as emotionally volatile, is capable of calculating rage and boundless endurance when provoked, and perhaps most dangerously, that they were willing to act alone. Council members resigned. Others declared neutrality, fearful of choosing a side that might vanish next. Trade networks shifted toward human-brokered ports. AI cores recalibrated their diplomatic prediction. Models to include a new variable, Earth factor. Scholars debated it. Militaries trained for it. Cultures rewrote stories about it. But the people, the billions across colonized space understood it intuitively. Humanity had earned its place, not through ancient bloodlines or inherited technologies, but through a defiance that refused to be reasoned away. through the absolute refusal to be broken, through a simple truth that echoed across systems, etched into orbiting debris, and burned into the memory of every surviving. Council officer, do not provoke Earth, not because of vengeance, not because of cruelty, but because they would end what you start, and they would not look back. As the years passed, alliances changed, old systems dissolved, and a new balance formed, not one dictated by Earth, but one stabilized by its presence. Planets that had never spoken to each other before now opened dialogue, hoping to be on the right side of the next shift. For the first time in centuries, peace didn't come from fear of the Council's fleets, but from the quiet knowledge that one world could fight the stars and win. The war was over, and Earth never once asked for forgiveness because it never wanted to be feared, only respected.